So today I'm going to demonstrate how to bend tubing using the JMR 3-speed manual tube bender. To begin the demonstration, we have the tube bender assembled and securely mounted on its stand. We have the anti-spring back kit installed, and we have the degree ring installed. Before we're ready to bend tube though, we next have to install the die and follower block set. A die and follower block come as a set sized for the size of tubing that you wish to bend. The die is marked with the size of the tubing on it, and we install the die into the bender with that label facing up and with the lug facing the front away from the pivot arms. So we take the die, insert it, drop in the pivot pin, and we have the die installed. You'll note on the follower block that there is a height positioning pin. We install that facing down in the back of the bender between the main arms. So we take our follower block, position it such that the gap between its working surface and the die is appropriate for the size of tube that we wish to bend, and then we take our follower block pin, drop it through the main arms and the follower block like so. You'll notice that the purpose of that height adjustment pin is not to hold the follower block in precise vertical alignment. Once we get the tube installed, it will actually float on the pin and self-align. It's simply to get you close to the right alignment as a convenience factor. Note that in order to bend, the surface of the follower block is to be lightly greased and the surface of the die is to be kept clean and dry. At this point, we're ready to get our tube. As I mentioned, today we're going to be bending a piece of 1-inch tubing. I've made an arbitrary mark for where to start our bend, and I'll show you how to align that. You can insert the tube either from the front or the back side of the bender. Today I'm going to just insert it from the back, like so. Take my follower block, align it vertically, and insert my tube. Now I rotate the die back into position. The next thing to be installed is the U-strap, which holds the tube to the lug on the die. Each U-strap comes with its own pin and is sized corresponding to the die and the follower block for the size of tube we'll be bending. In order to install it, we simply slip it over the tube and drop the pin down. The next step is to install the drive pin. The drive pin is what locks the pivot arms to the die so that the bending can occur. We simply take it and drop it down between the pivot arms and the die to lock it all firmly in place. With that done, it's time to align our tube for the bend. You remember I made a mark on the tubing where I want my bend to begin. I line that up with the front face or the leading edge of the die, which you can see just here. And I can visualize that either by looking from the front of the bender in this direction, or I can look down through one of the drive pin holes in the pivot arm and see that the tube is lined up. Once I have it all lined up, I simply put a little tension onto the pivot arms by pulling on them. And with that done, I'm just about ready to bend. All I need to do is install my degree pointer. So my degree pointer installs on the end of the lug using the supplied thumb screw. Slip it over, tighten the thumb screw. You can also tighten the tensioner bolt at this point just to keep everything tight, and align my pointer to 0 degrees. Like so. Double check there's initial tension on the arms, and we're all ready to bend. Before I actually start cranking on the handle and bending the tube, I will point out one of the great features of this bender, and why it's called a 3-speed, is that the position or the relationship between the drive rack and the lever is adjustable. You have 3 options, and what this essentially does is give you adjustable leverage. In this position here, the handle gives you max leverage. It's great for bending large diameter or heavy wall tubing. The far position here is the high speed position, particularly useful for small diameters or thin wall tubing. It allows you to get many more degrees of bend per pull on the handle. So what that does is make the bending operation a lot faster if you don't need the leverage for bending the heavier tube. And there's an intermediate position. Right now I'm going to leave it in the max power position, and a little later we'll show you the difference when we switch to the high speed position. So you would position the drive rack in the lever in the power position that you require, and then simply engage the first notch on the drive rack with the sleeve and the end of the pivot arms. When you do that, you then pull on the handle. Notice the pivot arms begin to open. The die begins to rotate. The indicator begins to indicate, and lo and behold, we are bending tube. As we bend the tube, we simply successively work our way down the teeth in the drive rack. Remember what I said about the max power position. Because this is this fairly small 1-inch tubing, with the max power position, you'll notice I've got so much leverage I can bend this tube with just 2 fingers. It's very easy to do. Now, depending on the degree of bend you wish to make in the tube, eventually as you work your way down the rack, you're going to reach the end of the rack. And that's when you have to reset the pivot arms to continue bending further. I'll demonstrate that now. So I've reached the end of the rack. Before I release the pressure entirely, keep a little pressure on the handle, disengage the release lever of the anti-spring back kit, remove the drive pin, and then while keeping pressure on the anti-spring back release lever, reset the pivot arms until I can align the drive pin with the next hole in the die. Simply insert it, put the initial tension back on, engage the next available tooth on the drive rack, and continue the bend. Notice with the anti-spring back kit, as I bend, after I pull on the handle, there's no spring back at all. The degree pointer doesn't move, makes it nice and easy to read, and yet it's simple to disengage at the end. Now, once we've reached the degree of bend that we desire, I'll show you the process to take the tube out of the bender. But before I do that, I do want to just demonstrate the 3-speed positions again. Once again, right now we're in the max power position, and if you take a look over here at the degree pointer, you can see that one bend gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5, 5 degrees worth of bend for one pull on the lever. If I now pull the pin and adjust the position of the drive rack in the lever to max speed, like so, drop the pin back in there, get it aligned. Have a look now at how far I can bend with a single pull of the lever. Almost twice as far. You'll notice too though that it takes more effort to do so. I can no longer bend with 2 fingers. I actually have to good pull on the lever. So depending on the material, this gives you great flexibility whether you want speed or power. Now, once we've reached the degree of bend that we desire, once again, keep a little tension on the lever, on the handle, disengage the anti-spring back kit, swing the drive rack and the lever out of the way, and then we remove the drive pin, just install that out of the way, close the pivot arms up, and it's time to remove our tube. And then we just give the tube a bit of a wiggle to loosen it up, make sure the tension's off the tensioner bolt, remove the U-strap pin and the U-strap itself, and then remove the tube from the bender. You can see that if you've got a complex shape, as I happen to have 2 ends bent in this, it's probably useful to remove the die and just slide the tube out. With that done, we now have our nice 90-degree bend made in our 1-inch tube using the JMR 3-speed manual tube bender.